The sea was never kind to Wraithmore. Nestled against the rugged cliffs of a forgotten coastline, this desolate town had once thrived as a port in the early 1800s, until one by one its inhabitants disappeared. Now, only the wind and waves whispered through its rotting shacks and salt-worn streets. Only one structure still stood tall and proud at the edge of the cliff, the Wraithmore Lighthouse, and inside it, the Lantern Keeper still watched. It was 1987 when Jonathan Graves received a curious letter. He was a disgraced journalist turned ghostwriter, living a quiet, miserable life in Boston. The letter was brief, unsigned, containing nothing but a key, a faded photograph of a lighthouse, and 5 words written in delicate ink. "Come, Wraithmore needs its keeper." Jonathan had never heard of the place, but something about that photo felt familiar, like a dream he'd half forgotten. He dismissed it, but that night he dreamt of crashing waves, of a dim light pulsing in the fog, and of something, watching him from the cliffs. By morning, his bags were packed. Jonathan arrived days later. Wraithmore was colder than he expected, draped in an unnatural fog that never lifted. The locals wouldn't speak of the lighthouse. An old woman spat at the ground when he asked for directions. A man at the inn refused to rent him a room once he learned where he was going. "Lantern's cursed," the innkeeper said. "Takes what it wants, won't let you go." Jonathan said nothing. The lighthouse stood exactly like the photograph, towering, elegant, wounded by time. Yet the light still rotated above, flickering faintly through the mist. But inside, there was no power, no fuel, no working mechanism. Still, the lantern glowed. Jonathan spent his first night in the keeper's quarters. At 2:13 a.m., he was awoken by 3 loud knocks, tap, 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 on the tower stairs. No one was there, only a trail of wet footprints leading downward toward the sea. He followed them, barefoot and half asleep, but the trail vanished at the lighthouse door. When he turned around, a voice whispered in his ear, "You've come back." Jonathan screamed. The next day, he found a journal beneath the bed, a logbook belonging to past keepers. The entries were maddening, half gibberish, names scratched out. One passage read, "She walks in the surf again. The girl with no eyes. She calls for me. Says I forgot her. Says I lit the fire too late." Another said, "The sea gives, the sea takes, the keeper stays." And this one, most disturbing of all. Jonathan Graves arrives 1987, stays 17 days, becomes the Lantern. He dropped the book. The ink was fresh. Jonathan began to change. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating. He'd stand in the lantern room for hours, staring into the fog. He thought he saw figures out there, men with missing faces, children drifting across the waves, a woman in black holding a drowned baby. Each night, the same 3 knocks returned, each louder than the last. He boarded the stairway door, but they came from inside. On the 7th day, the sea receded for miles. Jonathan stood on the cliff's edge, watching an impossible path reveal itself across the ocean floor, twisting stones leading to a jagged island that had never been on any map. The lighthouse's beam locked onto it. He followed. At the center of the island stood a ruin, a shrine built from whalebone and shipwrecks. There, tied to a post, was a corpse wearing his coat, his boots, and a locket belonging to his late wife, Margaret. The corpse opened its eyes. Jonathan ran, but the tide had returned. The path was gone. The sea swallowed him whole. Jonathan awoke on the lighthouse floor, soaked but unhurt. The lantern was burning brighter than ever, now a deep, blood-red hue. The tower walls pulsed like a heartbeat. He wasn't alone. Figures lined the room, ghostly echoes of previous keepers, their mouths sewn shut, their eyes hollow, all pointing upward toward the flame. A voice echoed, "The sea forgets, but the flame remembers. You belong to the light now." The logbook now had hundreds of entries in his handwriting. Names, dates, tragedies. It spoke of shipwrecks he'd never seen, storms he'd never reported, deaths he'd never caused. But one stood out. Margaret Graves, lost at sea, 1972. The lantern was unlit. It all rushed back. He had once been keeper. He had abandoned his post, left the light cold. His wife had died in the wreckage of the Astrabel, and in the moment her soul reached shore, there was no light to guide her. The sea had taken her, and she had waited ever since. Jonathan stood in the lantern room for what felt like days, weeks. He lit the flame each night, not with oil, not with matches, but with memory, with guilt. Each night, the sea delivered another soul, another wanderer lost in fog, drawn to Wraithmoor's cursed call. He logged their names. He welcomed their ghosts. And every morning, the light grew dimmer, until one day it flickered no more. In 2003, a group of hikers found the ruins of Wraithmoor Lighthouse. It had long since collapsed. There was no lantern, no journal, no bodies. Just an old rusted sign half buried in seaweed. It read, "The sea forgets, but the keeper never leaves." Some say, on nights when the fog is thickest, you can still see the red glow from the cliffs. And if you listen closely, you might hear 3 knocks.